The moment doesn't begin with screams or nails. It begins with silence. A silence so heavy it feels like the world itself is holding its breath. Season 6, Episode 1 of The Chosen doesn't ease you back into the story. It pulls you straight into the cost of everything that has been taught, promised, and believed. This is not an episode about miracles. It's about what happens when the miracle doesn't come. Episode 1 opens in a place far more terrifying than violence: uncertainty. Jesus is still free, still walking, still teaching, but everything around him feels different. The warmth of earlier seasons is gone. Every conversation feels careful. Every pause feels loaded. You can sense that the story has crossed a line it can't return from. This episode isn't rushing toward the crucifixion. Instead, it slowly tightens the rope, showing how pressure builds long before the first blow is struck. Jesus speaks less now, and when he does, his words carry weight instead of reassurance. There's no attempt to calm fears or promise safety. His calm feels deliberate, almost painful to watch, because it contrasts so sharply with the growing panic around him. The people closest to him are starting to realize something they've been avoiding. Following him doesn't mean winning. It means losing everything you thought victory looked like. The disciples are no longer united by confidence. Doubt slips into their conversations, not as rebellion, but as fear. They whisper questions they're afraid to say out loud. They look at Jesus searching for a sign that things will turn around, but all they find is resolve. That quiet acceptance terrifies them more than any threat ever could. Faith, in this moment, doesn't feel powerful. It feels fragile. What makes this episode so heartbreaking is how human everyone feels. No one is strong enough for what's coming, and the episode doesn't pretend otherwise. Love doesn't disappear, but it becomes heavier. Loyalty doesn't vanish, but it begins to shake. The episode makes it painfully clear that belief doesn't shield you from suffering, it leads you straight into it. Season 6. Episode 1 sets the tone with brutal honesty. There is no comfort offered, no emotional escape. It's the beginning of a journey where every step forward costs something precious. And as the episode unfolds, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. The crucifixion isn't just approaching. It has already begun in the hearts of those who know what's coming and can't stop it. What makes episode 1 so unsettling is how little actually happens on the surface and how much happens underneath. There are no dramatic turns yet, no public violence, no final judgment. Instead, the danger lives in conversations that feel unfinished and looks that last a second too long. The episode leans heavily into silence, and that silence says more than words ever could. You can feel the world closing in, not suddenly, but slowly, like a trap tightening one careful click at a time. Jesus moves through these moments with a calm that feels almost unbearable to watch. It's not the calm of confidence or control. It's the calm of acceptance. He knows what's coming, and he no longer tries to soften that truth for the people around him. That restraint changes everything. Earlier seasons often used hope as a shield. Here, hope becomes a question mark. The absence of reassurance forces everyone to face their fear without distraction. The disciples struggle the most in this space. They want instructions. They want a plan. They want something they can do to stop what they sense is approaching. Instead, they are given waiting, and waiting feels like punishment. Their faith is no longer tested by opposition from the outside, but by confusion on the inside. They begin to realize that obedience doesn't always come with clarity, and that realization shakes them deeply. At the same time, power begins to move quietly in the background. Authority doesn't raise its voice yet. It watches, it measures, it calculates. The episode makes it clear that what's coming won't be driven by chaos, but by order. Decisions are being prepared long before they are announced, and that makes the danger feel even more real, because it feels controlled, justified, and inevitable. By the end of this section, the emotional weight has settled in. Nothing explosive has happened, yet everything feels worse. The audience understands that the storm is no longer a possibility, it's a certainty. Episode 1 isn't asking viewers to brace for impact. It's asking them to sit with the knowledge that the path forward is already chosen. and no amount of faith will make it easier to walk. As episode 1 continues, the idea that faith equals protection completely falls apart. The characters begin to understand that belief is not a shield that keeps pain away, but a commitment that keeps you present when pain arrives. This realization changes the emotional rhythm of the episode. Every interaction feels heavier because no one can pretend anymore. The future they hoped for is no longer guaranteed, and the cost of staying begins to feel frighteningly real. Jesus remains steady, but that steadiness no longer comforts those around him. It unsettles them. His silence feels intentional, as if he's allowing events to unfold without interference. That choice forces everyone else to confront their own limits. Some try to cling harder, others pull back quietly, afraid of what staying might demand of them. The episode doesn't judge these reactions. It presents them as human responses to overwhelming fear. The apostles, once so bold, now hesitate. They speak less about victory and more about survival. Questions of loyalty surface without being spoken directly. How far are they willing to go? What happens when following Jesus no longer brings admiration, but danger? The episode shows faith being tested not through temptation, but through exhaustion. Through the slow realization that love sometimes leads to loss instead of reward. There's also a growing sense of isolation around Jesus. Even when he is surrounded by people, there's a distance no one can cross. They love him deeply, but they cannot follow him where he's going. That separation is one of the most painful elements of the episode. It shows that true obedience can be a lonely path, even when you're deeply loved. By the end of this section, the emotional truth is clear. Faith without safety is terrifying. There are no guarantees, no promises of escape, and no certainty that everything will make sense in the end. Episode 1 forces the audience to sit with that discomfort. It asks a difficult question without answering it. If faith costs everything, is it still worth it? Episode 1 grows darker as fear begins to influence decisions in subtle but dangerous ways. No one announces betrayal. No one declares opposition. Instead, loyalty erodes quietly, shaped by self-preservation and uncertainty. The episode shows how fear doesn't always arrive as panic. Sometimes it arrives as logic, as caution, as the desire to survive, and that makes it far more difficult to confront. Authority figures move with careful precision. They don't appear cruel or explosive. They appear reasonable, measured, concerned about order. That calm is what makes them terrifying. The episode highlights how injustice often hides behind procedure and polite words. Responsibility is passed from one place to another until no one feels fully guilty, yet irreversible decisions are set in motion. This isn't evil fueled by rage. It's evil fueled by comfort and control. Jesus stands at the center of this pressure without resisting it. His presence exposes truth without accusation. He doesn't argue. He doesn't defend himself. That restraint forces everyone else to reveal who they really are. Some choose distance, some choose silence, some convince themselves that stepping back is the same as staying neutral. The episode makes it painfully clear that neutrality, in moments like this, still has consequences. Among the disciples, fear begins to fracture unity. They are no longer afraid of being wrong. They are afraid of being seen, afraid of being associated, afraid of standing too close when the cost becomes visible. This isn't shown through dramatic confrontations, but through hesitation, through glances exchanged, through conversations that end too quickly. The episode captures how betrayal often begins long before any action is taken. By the end of this section, the tension is suffocating. The machinery of injustice is already moving, and no one seems able to stop it. Episode 1 makes a devastating point. The crucifixion doesn't begin with nails. It begins with fear, silence, and the decision to protect oneself instead of the truth. By the final stretch of episode 1, the story settles into a quiet, devastating clarity. Nothing dramatic needs to happen anymore because the outcome now feels inevitable. The episode doesn't end with chaos or violence. It ends with understanding, a shared, unspoken realization that the path ahead cannot be changed. The moment of return has already passed, and everyone feels it.